Some stories aren't just about building companies, they're about learning to navigate uncertainty, ambition, identity, and that wild frontier where technology meets human intuition. Today's conversation sits right at that intersection. Welcome to AIBiz. Today we're exploring what it takes to build not one but multiple AI startups in eras that have changed faster than most of us could keep up with. Discriminative models, generative models, and now autonomous agent ecosystems. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, today's guest, Michael, has built products that actually work in the real world. Our guest is the co founder and CEO of Tenki AI, an AI forecasting company pushing the boundaries of probabilistic reasoning and prediction markets. His work has underwritten trillions in climate risk, scaled enterprise AI to millions in ARR, and helped raise more than $78 million along the way. He's also a gay entrepreneur navigating this journey with his husband and three dogs in Bend, Oregon. And honestly, that matters because who we are off the mic inevitably shapes the decisions we make on it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about forecasting the future without pretending we can control it. Let's talk about building companies, then the path isn't obvious. And let's talk about what happens when a builder decides to push the boundaries of what AI can actually reason about. Michael, it's so nice to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the great intro.
Yes, thank you. So, Michael, you've built AI companies across three very different eras: discriminative models, generative models, and now agents. How did each era change the way you think about what's possible?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I've been in AI my whole career. So I started off in consulting at McKinsey and Company. Uh, this was probably about 15 years ago, back when AI wasn't nearly as capable as it is today. But what we had back then is what was known as discriminative AI. So we could have these AI models that could do very narrow tasks, like classifying images, setting the price of like an airline ticket. But those systems couldn't reason about anything outside of the domain that they were in. You couldn't take a airline pricing system and ask it to write a poem like you can do today with today's ChatGPT.
Mm.
Um, so things were a lot simpler, a lot more brittle. Um, but they could deliver value in narrowly focused domains. So that's what I started building with a company called Zesty AI, where we forecast and built predictive models for the U.S. property insurance industry. So taking attributes of properties and trying to decide which would be more at risk from things like wildfires, hail, severe convective storms, and you could do better than what the industry was doing prior to prior to our models, which was a pretty basic algebraic models or sending out a human inspector to the property. But it still required like a team of, I built out a team of like 25 data scientists and PhDs to actually do this. And we were only looking at this one question, one very narrow question of, is this property or home at risk from, say, a wildfire? Like that was the only thing that the model could do. And then generative AI came to the fore. And suddenly we had a tool that was very good at general purpose text generation and reasoning. So you could take this model like GPT-3, GPT-4, and not only have it work in one domain, like writing copy, but it could also code. It could also classify things, and that was very different than what had come before. Um, and so that was what I built my second company around, which is Paxton AI. Paxton AI is a legal research tool for attorneys in the U.S., used by thousands of attorneys to help them with tasks like legal research. So the system could use generative AI to not only look up the correct court cases, but also interpret them and provide some commentary about why they were relevant to the problem that an attorney was looking at. So we went from having to have like a large team of very specialized technicians to now you can build something on top of an API that we have this general purpose intelligence that we can then apply to these specific domains. And now with Tenki, this is the evolution. This is the next evolution, I feel, where we're into AI agents, where agents, uh, systems can actually understand the world and take action based on information that they receive. So in our case, we're using that to produce better forecasts, starting with prediction markets. But I think this is the next frontier, and what I'm really excited about, where you can actually have systems that can act somewhat like a human, where it's not just a very narrow domain like climate risk or pricing, but taking information about the world, structure it, and then make a decision. And I think this is going to unlock tremendous value for the economy, for consumers, for employees. And so I'm super excited about it.
Yes, yes. And this makes me wonder, do you feel the industry actually learned anything between those eras, or did we just get louder tools and bigger hype cycles?
Yeah. It, human behavior, it, well, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So, um, there's a great framework or model called the Gartner hype cycle, where it kind of describes the adoption of any new technology, where there's an initial excitement, and maybe a period of overinvestment. People then start to get comfortable with what it can actually do, and maybe there's part of the curve or the cycle called the trough of disillusionment, where there's a period of hype. Um, Things didn't quite live up to expectations, and then you start actually figuring out what the technology is good for. And it seems like we go through that with every wave of new technology. So it's not new for AI by any means, but I think the scale and the level of attention placed on this cycle or trend makes it feel somewhat new. But there's going to be these periods where people try to apply the tech into places where it shouldn't be, or they get more excited than where the capabilities are. But it happens every time. And once that hype goes away, that's when the real technology and the real use cases emerge. So I don't see it playing out any differently with this cycle. Um, It's just I think part of human nature.
Yes, yes. And do you think is it possible that the industry keeps reinventing the vocabulary without solving the fundamentals like reliability, safety, and real world deployment?
Yeah, I think what I've noticed happening a lot in this wave as opposed to other AI waves. Like, I mean, we've had some form of AI since like the 1950s, depending on how you want to define it. And it goes through these periods of great interest and hype and disappointment. There was a period of time where I think it was in the 80s where we were trying to encode all human knowledge in a machine readable format, and that didn't pan out at all. Um, but there was a lot of great excitement around it. Um, and I think in this wave, because there's been tremendous growth, because there's been tremendous amount of attention paid to it, a lot of people who are not AI experts, who don't have AI training, are getting into this. And I think we're seeing a lot of the fallout from that, where people with, say, just a technical background or a software background are getting into the space and don't know how to set up proper evaluations, don't know how to set up proper guardrails. But the amount of talent that had that training prior to like the big generative AI boom is pretty scarce. So people are making do with, say, general software engineering talent. And I think it's so easy to just like hook up an API and put together a demo that a lot of people are going off of that, but they're ignoring kind of the fundamentals and how these systems actually need to be put into production. And so I think you're seeing a lot of people without that training or background put these into production and seeing the poor results from that. But I think collectively, as more people get educated about this, as more people get familiar with what these tools are good for and what they're good at and what they're not good at, we'll see a lot of that go away. But right now, it's the Wild West. People are moving fast, and you're gonna see some things not succeed. And I think it's important to remember that we've seen that in every technology adoption cycle, or these periods of overinvestment of hype and people in search of fame and fortune getting attracted, even though they don't have that background in it.
Mm, true, true. And what you said brings us to the next big misunderstanding most founders have. You've founded and scaled multiple AI startups. From your perspective, what do most founders misunderstand about building a real AI business versus a shiny demo?
I think I think it's not too dissimilar to building any business. You need to build something that people want, um, and you need to build something that solves an actual problem for your users or your customers. And it might sound obvious, it might sound trite, but I think a lot of people miss that. They they fall in love with their own idea or their own way of viewing the world, and they forget to validate it with actual customers. They forget to actually try to understand, like, you're not just building for you, you're building to solve someone else's problem. And a lot of people start with building the product, building something that they believe in. When I think most people would be better served by going out and go talk to 50 customers, find out if you are actually solving a repeatable need before you go out and build something. Um, and that's what we've tried to do at all my companies, is validate that the demand exists for what you're building before you go invest a bunch of time and money into building it. Because I see a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, AI or not, make that mistake. And then they end up spending a lot of capital and months of time just building something that people don't want. And then when they finally get to the market and figure that out, they don't have as much time or capital to pivot or adjust their product. So I think a lot of startups, a lot of businesses fail for that reason. Um, so I think that matters for both AI and non-AI businesses. For AI specifically, like, you got to get beyond just a fancy demo. You need to really make sure that once you put this in the market, it's going to deliver something that's delightful and useful to people, and that comes with a lot of discipline, a lot of evaluations, a lot of iterations on the product. But a lot of people just kind of use the OpenAI API, get a demo that works in like a handful of situations, but the actual real work is that gap between the demo and production, and that's also a gap that a lot of people can't cross.
Yes, yes. Your answer does say a lot about the gap between building something fundable and building something sustainable. And honestly, most people don't want to admit how different those two paths are. And that leads me to your latest company, where the focus isn't the flash, but actual reasoning. Tenki AI is betting big on AI forecasting, real probabilistic reasoning, and not just pattern matching. What made you confident this was the next frontier instead of just another niche?
Yeah, my co-founder Jay and I, we both have deep backgrounds in forecasting. My first company is SDAI. we build predictive models for the insurance industry, and those models are used to underwrite, over 4 trillion in assets today. Jay got his PhD in using statistical models to forecast political conflict, and spent 10 years doing AI at Google. So we know how hard forecasting is, and how hard it can be to do it well, and to even do it in a narrow domain. Um, just a couple of years ago, it would have required a team of data scientists, a team of PhDs, economists, to actually do well. And because of the expense, the amount of time and effort it takes to do a forecast, you would only see that applied for things like inflation, or uh, different policy analyses, or in things like, strategy consulting, where you're trying to predict the size of a given market. There are techniques that actually generate better decisions, generate better decision-making processes under uncertainty, which is what forecasting is. But but like I mentioned, they required all this specialized talent, effort, and time. And I think with AI agents, we're finally at a point where we can take these methodologies, that specialized way of thinking about the world, and make it accessible more broadly. So not to just people who can afford to hire an economist or an economic consulting firm, but to anyone who wants it on demand, very cheaply, and with just a couple minutes of processing time. With generative AI, and with AI agents, we now have PhD level intelligence available on demand. And what we're doing at Tenki is taking that, and applying it to rigorous forecasting methodologies, so that we can make these tools, these frameworks that have decades of research backing them, and have been applied successfully, at very high levels, and make that more broadly available. So that's why we're starting with prediction markets, because prediction markets contain very well formulated forecasting questions, like, not just like, oh, will the economy be good or bad, but, will the economy experience 2 consecutive quarters of either economic growth or economic decline? And that by say 2027. And that is a properly formatted forecasting question, and something that's in abundance on these prediction markets. So we think this is a great proving ground for the technology, for the methodology. But our ambition is to power and improve every business decision that happens, globally. But how do you start something? How do you actually get to that big vision and goal? You take one step at a time, and that's why we're starting with prediction markets. But our ambition, our vision is much greater than that.
Yes, yes. And what you said makes me wonder, if Tenki is right, what breaks first? Prediction markets, corporate decision making, or our assumptions about how much humans actually know?
Yeah, it's not like we can know the future, uh, for certain, but what we can do is lay out the different potential options, help people understand what might lead to one path or another, and then help quantify that uncertainty. And these are, yeah, that methodology, that framework is what, is how decisions are made at the top levels of corporations and governments, or should be. Um, and uh, Enabling people to think that way and to apply it more broadly is our goal. So I think prediction markets, will adapt if we're successful. Maybe a lot of the edge goes away, but I think letting people apply that to any decision hopefully will result in better decisions, and at least letting people know all the different ways something could eventually unfold, and the different probabilities or levels of uncertainty associated with each of those paths. So I think if we're successful, and we're starting with a place where people are betting real money. So I think people do have an incentive to actually try to do better at this, and try to use things that have been proven to work. Um, we can hopefully influence a generation, on how to make actual better decisions.
Yes, yes. And Michael, You've helped raise more than $78 million across your startups. What's the part of fundraising nobody tells the next generation of founders?
Yeah, there's a whole sort. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know when I started, and I wish I knew. And I try to capture a lot of that on my blog, so you can check out Pioneering Thoughts at Substack, where I just started it as a way of writing down what I've learned over the years to try to not forget the important lessons and maybe help others along with. Um, but I think people people think that there's kind of like a magic pitch or a magic trick to getting funding, and it's really a sales process. Uh, it's about it's more about identifying people that resonate with your message and finding those and communicating effectively to those people than it is convincing people who were never going to believe in you in the first place. Um, so I think if you can do a little bit of research or try to figure out, hey, is this investor aligned with my vision, with how I think about the world? You'll probably have a greater chance of success with pitching those folks rather than trying to pitch anyone who will talk to you and try to convince them that you're right. I found that I've tried to do that previously, and I haven't had a lot of success with it. What I've found that works is you eventually find someone who agrees with you, who believes in you, and is willing to take a chance on you. Uh, and those people tend to respond the best to authenticity, to a powerful, well articulated vision, versus, you're going to convince someone who's skeptical with a powerful pitch deck. Um, I think that's less likely to work, or at least I've been less successful at that versus trying to find people who are already kind of primed to accept your message, your way of thinking. So, luckily today with the internet and with all these generative AI research tools, you can kind of articulate your vision and how you think about the world and try to find investors that match with those with how you already think versus trying to convince people who might be skeptical or never were going to believe in you in the first place.
Yes, yes. And listening to you, I feel like what you're saying is fundraising essentially is a responsibility and not just validation, which makes me wonder, was there any specific moment where you realized this?
There's a great book out there called Fall in Love with the Problem, not the Solution, by Yuri Levine, who co-founded Waze um, and a number of other successful companies. But he called fundraising the dance of 100 no's. That you would have to talk to 100 people and hear no 100 times in order to hear that one yes. So it was really this like sifting process. And having gone through that a couple times, it can be very frustrating, very disappointing to hear no so much, and very discouraging. Right? I just tried to examine why that was and how we go about matching investment to entrepreneurs. And at least what I think I've come away with is that it's really not about convincing people. Um, it's really about finding the people who align with your worldview and how your vision and getting in front of them. And I think that's true in marketing and sales and other contexts. Like I found content marketing works really well for, say, attracting customers who already agree with how you see about the world versus trying to convince people who uh, are are not aligned with your worldview. I think that is a much harder task. And just having tried it a lot, I found, just trying to identify people who align with you to be a much, much better way of going about it.
Yes, yes. I feel like it's not about selling your point. It's more like finding the people who respect your point as much you respect your point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, doing stuff like going on podcasts or writing blogs or putting stuff out into the world, I really love this concept of a luck surface area. So, the bigger surface area that you put out into the world, the more visible that you are, the more you increase your own luck, the more you increase the chances of you running into the right people,
Mm.
of you connecting with people who share that worldview. And I think, at least for me, that's been a pretty powerful way of viewing the world or trying to go about it. Even, I don't live in like Silicon Valley or New York or one of these capitals. I live in Bend, Oregon, but being able to put out content on the internet into these different communities and connect with people that way has been pretty powerful for me and has definitely enabled me to attract the right people who can enable a lot of these things. So I think, uh, rather than trying to, convince people to align to your view, like you know, putting a lot of good stuff out into the world, making sure you're visible and increasing that surface area, I think increases the chances that the right people find you. And I think
Mm.
that's been a pretty effective tool for me and one I've kind of come to appreciate the more experience that I have.
Yes, yes. I feel like whatever you're doing is very much inspirational. And honestly, all this conversation that I had with you is very insightful. But before we wrap our episode, for our listeners who would love to connect with you, can you please tell them the ways to do so?
Yeah. I really appreciate the conversation and thanks for having me on. You can check out trytenki.ai, trytenki.ai. We have our contact information there. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, and you can connect with either my personal account, Michael Ulin, or the Tenki accounts that are available there. Always happy to chat with you folks and people are trying things or people interested in forecasting. So, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yes, yes, great. So all the ways so as to how to connect with Michael will be in our show notes. So I request all our listeners to go and check that too. Well, Michael, as I said, it was very insightful conversation with you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so today's conversation hit something deeper than AI strategy. It reminded us that building companies is really about building clarity in uncertainty. Whether you're engineering a forecasting system or trying to make a life that feels aligned, the work is the same. It's choosing every day to be honest about what you know, what you don't, and what you're willing to learn along the way. To our guests, thank you for showing us that real innovation isn't loud. It's disciplined, it's human, and it's grounded in courage to build things that won't be understood right away. To our listeners, if you're building something, dreaming something, or trying to navigate the fog of the future, keep going. Curiosity is a strategy, and uncertainty is not a flaw, it's a feature. This is AI Biz with Charu. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay bold.